Well, as Aidan has already said, we've finished our 6 weeks on the Lord's Prayer, and now we're moving to the next kind of item on Jesus' agenda in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 to 7, the topic of fasting. Now, what is fasting? Well, I assume we all know what it means. Dictionaries define it as abstaining from all, or at least some kinds of food or drink for a variety of purposes, for dieting, for preparing for surgery, or relevantly for us, for religious or spiritual purposes. And as a religious observance, fasting is not, and clearly not just a Christian thing, is it? Just this Thursday gone, I think Muslims celebrated the Feast of Eid, the end of their kind of month-long Ramadan fast. For about a month, nearly 1 billion people, maybe 1 billion people or more around the world, do not eat and drink between sun-up and sundown. Muslims fast, Hindus fast, Buddhists fast, Jews fast, Baha'i fast. Interestingly, Zoroastrians don't fast. Everyone else, though, they fast. And fasting has got a long and illustrious history. Some say it goes back to the very beginning. The 4th century theologian, Basil the Great, said this in a sermon some 1600 years ago on fasting. He says, "Have respect for the antiquity," that's the ancientness, "of fasting. It's as old as humanity itself. It was prescribed in paradise. It was the first commandment that Adam received. Of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil ye shall not eat." Now, you can debate whether or not that was technically a fast. And fasting for Christians and for other religions is often associated with praying. As Sheila says often, or at least she said it a couple of times to me, fasting without praying is otherwise known as starving. Fasting without praying is starving. And you can see the connection between fasting and praying in our passage, because just as Jesus has finished teaching us how to pray, he then moves, verse 16, when you fast. It's not coincidental. In Scripture, prayer and fasting go hand in hand. But there is a danger in talking about fasting. There's a danger in talking about praying too, because the power of prayer and the power of fasting is in the actual doing, not in the explanation, but in the bodily participation. It's kind of like you've got to do it to see its worth. However, given we all, or many of us, I'll include myself, struggle with prayer and fasting, that's why we're preaching about it, even if the proof of the pudding will only be in your eating, in your praying and fasting. And given there are probably some of us here who have never kind of fasted for spiritual reasons at least, perhaps there's some of us here that are even a little suspicious of the practice of fasting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 3 reasons for fasting. But before that, I'm going to give you 2 bad reasons for fasting, right? 2 bad reasons for fasting and then 3 good reasons for fasting. Bad reason number 1, fast because then you can show off. Fast because then you can show off. In fact, that's Jesus' focus, isn't it? Have a look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 16. "When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your face and wash your face." So oil on your head, wash your face, "so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting." Now, you might be thinking, because there's 2,000 years between us and Jesus, there's kind of a cultural dissonance. You might be thinking, as if I would show off about fasting. Because if my friends or my family or my co-workers found out that I was fasting, they might think I'm a little weird. I'm very happy, thank you very much, Jesus, to keep the fasting on the down low. But here's the point. The culture might be different. But the temptation to show off about religious devotion, about kind of righteous practices, that's kind of universal, and it kind of affects all of us. It's so easy to do things in the Christian life, even good things like prayer and fasting, to kind of look good in front of others. And Jesus says, if you do this, if you fast, if you pray, if you do these things for the sake of face, for appearance before others, then don't expect anything from God. You've kind of received your reward in full. And it is really hard not to kind of flaunt the good things you do. When you walk the old lady across the street, you kind of want people to see you do it, don't you? When you've done something in secret that's righteous, there's a part of you that screams at every opportunity to kind of put your cards on the table and kind of push them towards the other person to see. I mean, just this last week, I've done a couple of little fasts, and there's been a huge temptation for me to tell everyone I can about it. And if you want kind of proof of this dynamic, what you do next time you walk in through the front foyer doors at Visibility, that's the name of the centre, just look to your left, because what you see on your left, kind of placarded, is the donor board. You've got your community donors. You've got Ben Wyatt, MLA, Ravita A. Black, Eleanor John. And then you've got your key donors. They gave a bit more money. Mr. Dan Spinetta, Sir Charles Court, AKKCMGOBE, and Lady Judy Court, AMMBE. Then you've got your real cashed up. You've got your leadership donors. You have Dr. Harusha Handa. This is Handa Hall, by the way. He gave $1.5 million for the naming rights. And you've got the Sarich family, who gave $300,000. Now, I'm grateful for these people. I love the Visibility. It's not a criticism, and they're not blowing their own trumpet, but someone else is blowing their trumpet. And they're doing it because we like our trumpet blown. Jesus says in chapter 6, verse 3, "But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." So bad reason number one to fast, or to do any other kind of righteous practice, is to show off. Bad reason number two, don't do it because you think it makes you a proper Christian. You see, part of the reason why some of us here this morning might be suspicious of fasting as a practice is we have seen what other Christians, other religions have done with fasting. They have made it kind of like a precondition of genuine faith. If you don't fast, you're not a real Christian. And here's the thing, you might be able to say this of a religion like Islam. Fasting is one of the 5 pillars. So it's possible, I don't know because I'm not a Muslim theologian, it's possible you could say if you don't fast, you're not a legitimate Muslim, maybe. But you can't say that of a Christian. In fact, the Apostle Paul famously encounters teachings in a couple of churches where it looks like there's people saying you've got to fast in order to be a real Christian. And so when Paul writes to the church in Colossae, that's kind of ancient, modern-day Turkey, ancient Asia Minor, when he writes to the church in Colossae, in chapter 2, verse 21 of Colossians, Paul quotes these people. He says, do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. That's what they say. And then Paul says this in verse 22. He says, these rules, which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use, are based on merely human commands and teachings. Such regulations have an appearance of wisdom with their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and here's the key phrase, and their harsh treatment of the body, but they lack any value. Paul's speaking to a group of people in church, and he does it a couple of times in churches in the ancient world, who are saying to be a legitimate Christian, you've got to treat your body harshly and you have to fast. And Paul's saying, no. That's not how Christianity works, because Christianity is all about what Jesus has done for you, not what you do yourself. It's not about earning, it's not about dessert, it's about grace. Christians are grace-based life forms. We're a faith founded upon grace, about what God has freely given to us in Jesus. As soon as you make it about what you do, fasting or otherwise, Paul says you've actually lost your Christianity. So please, as we continue this sermon, please do not hear that in order to be a genuine, real Christian, you have to fast. That's not true. That's not the point of the passage or the point of the sermon. But I still want to make a case for fasting. Having said all that, I want to give you 3 reasons, because I think in churches there's kind of a spectrum. There's the kind of what Paul's just spoken about. There's the church, there's the spirituality that says you have to fast, otherwise it's not real. And at the other end of the spectrum is that, I would never fast, that's a little bit weird. All right, there's a spectrum. I think we as a church are closer to this side than to this side. I don't think there's any chance at Vic Park Presbyterian that there's someone after the church today is going to say, look, if you're not fasting, you're not a real Christian, we're going to take away your membership. Exceedingly unlikely. And if that does happen, come to me and we'll remove the person. It is more likely, though, that the people here, and perhaps you, who've never fasted and kind of thought it's kind of a weird thing. And so for you, let me make the case. 3 reasons for why fasting is a good idea, if not obligatory. Number 1, it's the shortest, it's the most self-evident. Why fast? Because pretty much everyone in the Bible fasts. Jesus fasted, Moses fasted, David fasted, Elijah fasted, Daniel fasted, the disciples fasted, Paul fasted, the early church fasted. And it's not hard, as you look at that, to reach the conclusion that fasting's probably a good thing to do, and probably something that God expects you to do. Have a look at Matthew 6, verse 16, our passage. Jesus doesn't say if you fast, he says when you fast. There's an expectation of fasting. So first reason, not complicated. Fast because I think kind of think God expects you to. Reason number 2 for fasting, and this is where I want to do something extremely dangerous as a pastor. I want you to take out your phone. Some of you have got it already. That's easier for you. If you don't have a phone, look at the person next to you if they're willing to share. And I want you to Google something, okay? Never done this. Never will do it again in a sermon because it's bound to go wrong. But here's what I want you to Google. I want you to Google what are the benefits of fasting. Okay, if you use a different search engine, that's fine. I don't even know what they're called these days. Use Dogpile or Ulster Vista. They disappeared 20 years ago. So Google, or equivalent, Google benefits of fasting. Now, this is something I've prepared earlier, so hopefully this works. Right, now, unless your algorithm is more holy than mine, right, here's what you're going to get. If it's Google, you're going to get a little AI summary, and it's going to say things like weight management. Fasting can lead to weight loss and reduction in body fat. Improved metabolic health. Heart health, cellular repair, and autophagy, whatever that is, reduced inflammation, etc., etc. And then what's underneath that, of course, is just a list of the associated websites. Here's the thing, though, because at the bottom of your Google, you've got like, I don't know what it's called, but it's like the Google thing with like 1,000 O's, right? That's kind of, and you click on the O's. Don't do it now because you're not going to listen to the rest of the sermon. Okay, put your phone down, that's enough, right? But if you follow the O's, go as long and as hard as you want. At not one point in those O's, I mean, I only went 5 O's deep. Maybe if you go 1,000 O's deep, you're not going to get a mention of a spiritual benefit. Now, of course, if you wrote spiritual benefits, you're going to get one, okay? My point is this. My point is that when we think about fasting, we almost never, as a culture, as a society, and Google indicates this, we never think about the spiritual benefits. Which is really sad because it shows you how we've lost thought about our soul, our spiritual formation. It's really sad, but it's also super convenient for me because it's a great segue to my next 2 points, which are the 2 spiritual benefits to fasting. Two spiritual benefits to fasting. Spiritual benefit number 1, fasting can help us put our stomach in its place. Fasting can help us put our stomach in its place. Now, obviously, I'm not a doctor. This is a metaphor. If your stomach's moved somewhere internally, go chat to Alex or Nathan about that. I mean it metaphorically. And I mean it metaphorically because it's very easy for our stomachs to reach into our heart and our head and, in fact, become our God above us. In his letter to the Philippians in chapter 3, Paul, the Apostle Paul, says this of the people who are opposing his message. He says this in chapter 3, verse 19. Their destiny is destruction. Their God is their stomach, and their glory is in their shame. Now, to be clear, stomach doesn't just mean your appetite for food. I mean, it can mean that. But actually, you can be extremely skinny, you can have absolutely no interest in food, and yet still be ruled by your stomach, because the word stomach in Paul's world, koilia, means appetites in general. It means earthly pleasures. In fact, in Romans 16, don't turn there, we don't have time, but Paul's talking about false teachers there who are causing division, causing strife, and he literally talks about those false teachers dividing the church as serving their stomach, their appetite for scandal or for status. And here's the point, it's incredibly easy to be ruled by your appetites. Think about Eden, that primordial sin with Adam and Eve. What does Genesis 3:5 says? It says, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing for the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. Look where it starts. Pleasing to the eye, desirable for food. The first sin, the prototypical sin, started with the stomach, and then kind of endless sins thereafter have followed. Think about Satan and Jesus in the wilderness. Matthew 4. Where does Satan attack first? Chapter 4, verse 1. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Master of understatement. He was hungry. Verse 3, the tempter came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. Satan's first attack was through the stomach. And how many are Satan's attacks in our consumer culture where appetite is king today? Our algorithms are like perfectly honed and weaponized to create hunger for more and more and more. Just this morning, we ran out of coffee, so I hopped on a little app to order some more coffee, and somehow in that app, there was this ad for Onitsuka Tiger shoes, which were like, cool, I'm old. They were shoes cool 20 years ago, and they were $69. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good, and then you follow that, and you follow that. In the end, I was going for coffee, and I bought shoes. Mandy, I didn't buy the shoes if you're there, to be... Partly because I knew I was preaching the sermon, but it's just kind of how it works, isn't it? In fact, there's a figure from the late Middle Ages that I think perfectly captures this moment in time that we have of like endless appetite. He's a duke from Belgium, and his name was Reynold III. Reynold III. He was grossly overweight as an individual, and after a violent quarrel he had with his younger brother Edward, well, Edward actually succeeded in winning not the quarrel, but there was actually a physical revolt. And so Edward captured the throne, or the dukedom, whatever the word is. And when Edward won, he didn't put Reynold to death. Instead, he built a room around the castle and promised, you may have heard the story, promised Reynold that as soon as he got out of this room, he would regain his title and his estate as soon as he left the room. And here's the thing, that room, for you and me, it wouldn't have been very difficult to leave because there was no bars on the doors, there was no lock, there were windows all around. The problem was Reynold's size. He couldn't get through the fairly normally sized door or windows. So all Reynold had to do to gain his freedom was to lose the weight to get through the door or the window. But you see, Edward knew his older brother Reynold. And so what he did is each day he sent a variety of delicious foods to him. And so all Reynold needed to do was to not eat all the food presented. And then he would get out. He'd be free. And yet, history preserves that Reynold just grew fatter and fatter. And when the Duke, Edward, the brother, was accused of cruelty, he had an answer. He said, my brother is not a prisoner. He may leave whenever he so wills. Apparently, it's hard to kind of fact check this on the internet, but apparently Reynold stayed in that room for 10 years and wasn't released until Edward actually died in battle. But then his health was so ruined by his diet that he died within a year. Died a prisoner of his own appetite. Reynolds' freedom was just there, just there. All he had to do was say no to himself. And I want to say that many of us live a little bit like Reynolds, don't we? Not obviously in the physical walls in prison, but imprisoned by our appetites, by our feeds, by the promises of our culture, the hunger for more, and more. And here's where fasting steps in. Fasting can be an incredibly helpful way of beginning to say no to things. Begin to take mastery of yourself, to put your stomach from your God, from your head, from your heart, back to its rightful place below. Because you see, here's the thing, the person that cannot say no to their stomach, to their belly, eventually does say yes to Satan. Not all at once, of course, not dramatically necessarily, but 10,000 small moments of prioritizing the flesh, of moments where the appetite just whispers one more, just a little bit more, and we're weakened, and we're weakened, and we're weakened. Fasting is a rehearsal for that refusal. Every time you sit down to a meal, if it's a meal fast, we'll talk about other fasts, and choose to abstain, to not eat, you are practicing something. You are training the will to override the body, the stomach's demands. Now, Richard Foster, the author, says fasting shows you what owns you and then helps you take ownership back of yourself. So let me ask the question, what are the things in your life that, of your stomach, of your appetite, that own just a bit too much of your heart and your head's real estate? Is it food? Is it caffeine? Is it sugar? Is it a hobby? Is it something on your screen? Here's the pitch of fasting. Why not go without it for a time? Not necessarily like forever, but for a period. It's like a leech, perhaps starve it then. I mean, it will hurt. That's what starving does. But you see, once you have, by God's grace, starved it, when it's lost its kind of leech-like suckers on you, you can often have it back. And it's often better when you get it back. I mean, sometimes you won't want it back because as you've given it up, you've realized that there's only really downside. I've been fasting from fantasy football for 13 years now. It actually hurt like hell to begin with. Now it's only upside. I fasted from algebra for 26 years. I've never looked back. But of course there are things, I've done it with caffeine, so much sweeter when it returns. Now to get practical, I would recommend if you are interested in doing that, now's not a terrible time. We're in the church has recognized the 40 days leading up to Good Friday and Easter is Lent. We're Presbyterian, we don't do that. We're not weird Anglicans, right? But let's not call it Lent, just call it 40 days leading up into Easter. Now's a great time to give up something. And you've only got like a week and a half left or what? My maths isn't good. 2.5 weeks, less than 40 days. This might be a good time to drop something. But here's the thing, often doing it cold turkey just it doesn't really work. So, no law here, just suggestions, no prescriptions, just chats. Think about social media. Is that kind of rotting your brain? Well, here's the thing, how about you reduce it by half for a week? And then reduce it by half the next week? And so on and so forth until you can have a week without it. And then ask the question, am I missing something by not being on there? Maybe you're not. Maybe your feed was not feeding you good, so let it go. Maybe you are, and then have it back, but have it better. If your thing is caffeine or sugar, as it is for me, slow wean, often the way to do it. Half, then half, then half, then half again. But whatever it is, food, sugar, social media, whatever it is, if you do it, and this is critical, it won't mean anything without prayer-filled dependence. Because if you do it in your own strength, it'll just grow pride, or if you fail, it'll be despair. It's only Christian fasting if it has God at the center. Which brings us to our final reason. Second spiritual benefit to fasting. Fasting creates space for God. Fasting creates space for God. Let me try and make this point by using a riddle. Not my riddle, I stole it from someone else, a guy called Ross Bird. Here's the riddle. What is an English word that literally means to lack an empty space? Not merely that means full, but one that means to lack a lack. All right, have a think. It's not easy. I didn't get it. And if you've got it, don't be self-righteous. Keep it inside. Don't show off. The word is incapacity. No more room. You lack a lack. And this is our problem. In the modern world, I think we lack a lack. And the lack that we lack, I'm now sounding like Dr. Seuss, the lack that we lack is often where God enters in. And without that lack, he finds it hard. Let me try and make the point from the Bible. Go back to Matthew chapter 5, the start of the Sermon on the Mount. Those famous Beatitudes, as they're known, the blessed statements. So have a look at the first 3 or 4. Matthew 5, verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. What do these states of blessedness have in common? They're all about a lack of spirit, a lack of comfort, a lack of strength, a thirst and a hunger. They're about deficit, a deficit that God comes and fills. But you see, us modern Westerners, we do our best, don't we, to make sure that there is no lack. Our lives are honed and fine-tuned to avoid any risk. If we're feeling hungry, then we have a fridge and we have Uber Eats. If we're feeling tired, we have that coffee or that Coke. If we have a headache, we take a Panadol. If we're feeling lonely, we search social media and fish for likes. If we're haunted by anxiety before bed, we kind of doom scroll on Netflix until we forget and we just fall asleep. You see, our lives are filled to the brim with comfort and coping mechanisms. And in that space, it's very hard for Jesus to find his way in. One author puts it like this. He says, every fast creates space. When the body is denied food, a hollow opens that reveals our dependence. That emptiness isn't actually absence, it's capacity, it's architectural. It carves out interior chambers where divine life can enter in. Well, if that's kind of too airy-fairy. Fasting takes all the coping mechanisms out of our hands and frees them to take Jesus' outstretched hand. This is another way to kind of come at it. How many of us have drawn near to God in a season of abundance versus a season of absence? You see, I can count on the fingers of one finger on one hand how many people that I'm aware of have joined this church because life was so great and they wanted someone to thank. But it would take several hands to count those who have joined this church and others because of suffering. Whispers in times of comfort, megaphone in times of suffering, as C.S. Lewis says. And fasting is kind of like, there's no way about it, it's kind of like a self-inflicted suffering. A suffering that does create space for God to do his work, though. Now, of course, people suffer. People fast, and they don't draw near to God. The hollow gets filled with something else. And that's why fasting without prayer is starving. It's about reaching out to God in our lack. And you see, here's the thing. When we reach out to God in our lack, he gives us exactly what we need. And what we need is actually more of him. When we reach out to God in our lack, He gives us exactly what we need, and what we need is Him. That is our reward. You see, we might have a little bit of a cringe reflex to the word reward, right? You can feel like we're earning something from God. But actually, reward is exactly the language. Have a look at Matthew 6:16 again. When you fast, that verse, 17 I think, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it might not be obvious to others that you're fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who has seen what is done in secret will reward you. In fact, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about rewards 9 times. Chapter 5, verse 12, rejoice and be glad because great is your reward in heaven. Chapter 5, verse 46, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Chapter 6, verse 1, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Verse 34, then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. See, 9 times Jesus talks about reward. We blush because we think it's some kind of cash equivalent rendered in the currency of heaven. But that's not what it is. The reward, I think, is God Himself. One author puts it like this: the treasury of heaven has nothing to do with accumulation. It consists in dilation. It expands the heart's circumference to receive more of God Himself. Or to quote John Piper, he talks about fasting makes us hungry, right? It begins with a hunger for the thing itself, for sugar, for caffeine, for dopamine. But it slowly becomes a hunger for God Himself. And God honors that hunger by feeding us more of Himself. He moves into the space that's created. Okay, almost there. Think back to reason number 1 I said for why we should fast, because God expects you to, right? That's a terrible way to put it. Can I say it? Terrible way to put it. God expects you to in the sense that God wants you to. God hopes that you will, because He knows that the best thing for you is more of Him. The best thing for you is more of Him, and that becomes very clear often, not always, but often when you are fasting. Because if you have fasted after God, you may well know that feeling. That kind of movement, it starts with kind of like a burning hole in your stomach. There's a weakness in your limbs. There's a kind of lightness to your head. The fog, that haze, but then it moves, it transforms, perhaps you could say it transfigures into an experience of something so much more. It's a kind of sweetness, that moves you to pray, and to pray at great depth. A kind of severity of joy in your heart, a kind of ache of love in your heart. You see, our prayer at Vic Park for this year, you might know it, is to draw nearer, love deeper, breathe freer, live bolder. Right? And you can absolutely do those things without fasting. You can draw nearer, love deeper, breathe freer, live bolder. I don't think you can do them without prayer, though. And I want to say that fasting, when combined with prayer, it's not a silver bullet. There's no guarantees, but I would say often God does fill that space that you have created. That there is a drawing nearer, a loving deeper, a breathing freer, and a living bolder. So please don't leave the sermon this morning thinking that you have to fast to be. I hope I've said that enough. You don't. You don't. But can I say that there is tremendous benefit to it? Of age, of health, if you're 2 years old, you're probably not understanding what I'm saying. Don't do it to an infant. If you're unwell, don't do it physically. It's not the right time probably. But at the right time and place, it has a place, and I think an incredibly helpful place as we try and draw nearer, love deeper, breathe freer, and live bolder. Let me pray. Father in heaven, thank you that you are a heavenly Father who gives good gifts. I pray as we think about our lives, as we think about our loves and our hearts, and as we think about our stomachs, I pray that we might have hearts after you, that we might pursue you. And Father, I pray that we might be willing to give up good things for the sake of the ultimate good, which is you. In Jesus' name, amen.